we did an interesting exercise because, I mean, out of 28 students in this digital transformation master, out of 28 students, there must be about 20 different nationalities. They're extremely diverse.
Okay, that's cool.
And so the first thing was, how about us doing our cross-cultural map together? And also, I put them in teams, and there's a little model that I use, which it's do your graph depending on 10 different variables on your beliefs and values, and basically preferences, no
tendencies.
You've probably heard of Hofstede and all those guys, and they started trying to define culture in a sort of a more specific way in the 1960s, 70s. Basically what I do is get them to think about, well, where are their preferences and what is non-negotiable belief for them? I mean, most often than not, when you ask somebody, what is your non-negotiable belief? They'll come up with some sort of very lofty things, like, well, respect. Yeah, everybody says that, If you ask 2,000 people, you'd say, well, in a cross-cultural environment, what would be something that's really important for you? And they would say, well, respect. Yes, but what is respect for you? How does that actually translate into behavior? Because it's very subjective. So, and very often, well, mostly, the perception of lack of respect is out of very silly things. But all of these things that are very small, and that at the end of the day, they manifest themselves in what we call the visible part of culture. But people tend to judge the visible part with their invisible part, which is the beliefs, right?
Yeah.
But you have to go beyond that. So, for example, just a belief that's taught in school and in families as well, that human beings are not entirely to be trusted. They're self-serving. That's natural order of things. They're self-serving, and they'll defend their own interests. So unless you have some really important and tight and strong social rules to keep people on the right path, well, they'll tend to behave badly towards other people. Whereas then there are other cultures that they tend to think that, well, people are innocent until proven guilty, but others where people are guilty until proven innocent, are they moral or immoral? And yet, I mean, if you're an international manager and you're leading people across different cultures and at a distance, and you come from a culture where people are not entirely to be trusted because it's natural, it's nothing personal, but human beings tend to be self-serving, to look after their own interests. So you have to have really strong norms. Well, you might, especially if you're working at a distance, you probably tend to micromanage to bits, and drive everybody crazy. Because you will have the natural tendency to think that, well, because I'm not there, they'll be doing their own thing, The assignment is okay. So they did their graph, So there are 10 cultural variables. One is what your beliefs about human nature, your beliefs about time. There are some cultures that give extraordinary importance to the past, tradition, rituals, and it also shows in for example, how important your grandparents are for you, and how in a room you always you show a special deference to the older people.
Yeah, you gravitate to the elders for wisdom and a big decision, for example. Yeah,
exactly. Whether you have collectivism, individualism, things that. Anyway, there are variables like this, and then so what I do is that I get them into groups of 6 or 7, and first of all they've drawn their individual one, and then they have to get together and draw the whole collective one. No? So it's interesting because they'll very quickly see where there are cultural convergences and where there are divergences. So the question was, okay, imagine you're a project leader. You're leading a transformation project in a company. And it spans several cultures and distances. And you've got together with your project team and you said, let's draw our cross-cultural charts. and you see that, well, there's a fair level of conversion in a number of them, but there's very, very strong divergence in the team between preferences for hierarchy, a participative style leadership, or preferring a very strong leadership that takes all the decisions. There's a strong difference in need for structure and clear process, and the others more agile preference for more agility and flexibility, right? And then there's a big difference in communication. A high context culture, which means when you and I communicate together, as you would do with anybody in your environment, you're not just listening to the words, right? For you, it's verbal quality or climate of the relationship that's there. It's the whole context that matters. It's not just the words that you choose. So a lot of the communication is very implicit, right? And so some cultures are very explicit and others are more implicit.
I would say just as this easy one for me to relate to, my French background is very explicit as we learn to put a word on everything, and it just becomes very wordy, very heavy.
Le mot juste, le mot juste.
Yeah, so it's like if you it's even frowned upon if you can't put quite the words on what you're trying to say. It's like you don't handle the language, man. So like, go back to school, and when you're
c'est pas seulement que tu peux pas. Yes, not only that you can't handle the language, is that you can't think.
Yeah, it's like
a French person.
Who's this guy? And when you go, go ahead.
No. If you can't actually explicitly choose the right word, it means that you're not able to think about it.
Yeah. And now it hurts your leadership. It hurts your leadership. Whereas in Quebec, if you're really trying to find the right word on it, it looks like you're fumbling. It looks like you're talking too much. It looks like you don't even know what you're talking about because it's just too many words. Come on, buddy. So it's just get to the point, And when you get to a point, there's less words, less phrases, less context, right? And now everything is implicit. So you're kind of like, if that word means this, it could mean also that. And now it sounds like you're talking Japanese, where the intonation makes all the difference. So it's like, okay, how do I build this sentence and set it in the right way? So doing politics or influence or leadership in Quebec, I don't want to say it's harder. It's more difficult. I would say it's definitely completely different, but it's the implicit versus explicit thing that it is quite a challenge.
Now, what's interesting there, you said something that's interesting because generally, and that's why French is in a class of its own.
Always.
They're in a class of their own because French, because they like to use the right words, but it's also a question. C'est une question de style plutôt que de définition.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So the French are much more, let's say, high context than one would think. They might use a lot of words, but their words, despite seeming precise, but they're quite wordy, and they'll go around quite a bit, and then they won't be necessarily very direct. Whereas, you look, for example, at German or Dutch. They don't use many words,
but they're precise.
And they're very direct.
Yeah.
They're very precise.
Yeah. It's the indirect part. Like, I enjoy the personal journey of being able to be to learn and appreciate the direct style of communication of Quebecers while using, some of the things I've learned in France. But it's counterintuitive because as a French speaker from France, it's, I could talk all day long, and not say anything. Not say anything, like of no substance, right? No substance.
No substance.
But I can still do it as well with having some solid substance. So it all depends on, again, to your point, your style. It's like, okay, I got 5 minutes to get my point across. All right, let's be smart about this one. Okay, how much context I want to provide versus substance. And for French people, if they have to sacrifice one for the other, they're going to go for context because it's more important for them They're very relational and social, so it's more important
Well,
for them to be on the same
you,
page. Versus,
you
it's
said
not
it.
important to decide. Deciding is not important. It's like, on se comprend. Oui, on se comprend. It's like we understand each other. It's like, awesome. That's an achievement. It's like, did we decide anything? No, 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 no. But it's an achievement for us, and we feel satisfied. If with Quebecers, it's
That's
like,
right.
did we decide anything? And they're going to be pissed off. They're going to be angry. Say, we didn't decide anything. We just talked. It's like, no, 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 no. We achieved something. We're agreeing on the same thing. It's like, so? So it's,
And
I don't know.
it's no, absolutely. It's you said something there because high context cultures tend to be relationship oriented. It doesn't mean that they're not task oriented too, but it's really important in any conversation or decision making is it not at least overtly put the relationship in danger. So
Yes.
confrontation, you should avoid it. So so the French use a lot of words to avoid confrontation. The some of the premises of leadership that were established in the 1960s or 1970s that basically talk about the two main sources of power, and it's important that they be sort of balanced. Well, there is no balance.
Yeah.
You know, so that in order to lead, on one hand, you're using personal power, right? Personal power, which is your capacity to get people to follow you because you communicate in such a way that you're able to engage people and create trust and engagement. Personal power is everything that has to do with your capacity to influence others. All right. Where an organizational power or functional power has to do with the empowerment that you are given by the organization, you know, the rank that you have and the perception of others that you are able to either make their life easier or more difficult. You know, reward them if they do a good job, or not reward them or make their life more difficult if they don't do a good job.
Yeah.
You know, so there's two sources of power, and traditionally it's always been considered that the two sources of power, the idea is that they be balanced. Okay. Back in the 1960s, 70s, it was a really new, let's say, idea in the sense that up to then, leadership and power had been especially come from the organizational power. But it's not always easy to see who has leadership quality, because what I've seen, for example, and this seems to be, of course, I haven't tested everybody in the planet, but you could be pretty safe until more or less 10 years ago. If you did a leadership style or a disc, those who were already in power and were managers and were leading teams, most often they were a mixture of what we call in the social styles, expressive driver, either expressive first and driver as support, or either driver and secondary expressive. What do those styles have? Is that they're basically extrovert and assertive. And you would rarely get managers in high positions that were either, what we call the amiable analytics. The good thing is, so for example, if you've got this grid where you have the four main personality styles, right? And before, you would tend to find most managers in the assertive quadrant, either expressive explorers that require more development jobs or sales jobs or any job basically where you were a manager, yet assertiveness was a key factor, and energetic or drivers, they called them as well, the same. And then so but now it's more
Balanced?
more balanced. So you find people that are, let's say, that get scores of 13, 14, 13, 14. That means they've got a bit of everything.
Okay.
I mean, and of course, my statistics are meaningless because what I do statistics per course. But when you think that over the last 2 years or 3 years, I very, very rarely had anybody who's got an assertiveness score of more than 15, whether you can get up to 27 points.
That is strange.
Yeah. You might get 15, 17, less extreme than before. Before it was more sort of black and white. You get people with scores of, basically what the test does is see, well, how many of your replies are more indirect in the way of influencing, and how many of your replies are more direct or assertive.
Is it?
And now
Yeah. Is it the fact that we're selecting, let's say the environment is producing, creating people that are less assertive? I mean, the cultural environment and all that, or there's less conviction. We're not convicted as convinced as much as we were about certain things, or are we less assertive as a global culture? Or is there something else we don't fully? Why has it changed? What's the shift?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I do think that, and because it's happening, I do a lot of these tests in let's say, master students. Okay. So students who are doing a master in project management or digital transformation or whatever, and they're around between 25 and 30. They've done their degree and they've had perhaps a year or two of experience, and they think of going anyway. So, and what I think, and I might be completely wrong, is this a consequence of the digital age? Will they don't socialize like they did before? I have a feeling that it might have to do with that most of the socializing is done like this.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ask them, it is true that a lot of them feel quite uncomfortable in some social situations that were absolutely natural to just the generation previously, previous generation.
And I can maybe resonate on this one because actually 100% feel that it's not the ugly duckling syndrome I have. It's the maybe not black sheep, but I feel sometimes out of context or out of culture in general settings when I'm with people in a similar age group, or not even similar. And I just feel that the social environment has changed so much that my own personal experience is that I know that I have this feeling that I'm taking way too much space in the room, that I'm talking way too much. And I know I have a tendency to talk a lot, but I feel it's not only about how much space I take, it's just my opinions are very... I feel the life has been sucked out of every single room I walk into. Whereas I feel the sadness about reliving those days, those Saturdays and Sundays where my dad would invite his buddies and couples friends for my parents at home, and we would spend. We were with them, They were they were tough parents, my parents, but they were inclusive parents when it came to discussions. So it's not like we could participate because we were kids in the French and Italian culture. In the 80s, at least, didn't let you know that you're a kid. If you're eating at the grown-up table, then let the grown-ups talk, and yeah, that's it. So, but we were I kind of was raised with people who talk things through every Sunday, and it was part of work as well, and I feel that I seldom relive those experiences, like in any given day of the week, where it's a table, a virtual table or whatnot of grown-ups having a real conversation about real things. So I think assertiveness comes with working stuff out, about talking about serious problems, not surface things. It's not about trying to be nice. It's about trying to figure stuff out. And if your conversation is about figuring stuff out, it's now a conversation. It's not about trying to be nice and trying to pass time. Yeah. So I don't know. I just feel that I'm really connecting what you're saying, because I feel that shift, which has happened because of technology, because technology has allowed people without even knowing it to avoid real conversations and avoid conflict. And now that if you're a leader, let's say take any one of your students when we're going to be finished with their masters or whatnot, they're going to be leading a agile or digital transformation. How the heck are they going to do that?
I don't know.
I think I believe we need to reunite at home. We need to redesign that social standard that there's going to be a time set in the week. It needs to be routined in, designed in a routine that we're going to discuss things.
Yeah, we were saying before, if we sort of close the loop and go back to the beginning of the conversation, that when we're in culture, very often it's not the big lofty ideas, it's the details that matter. Well, and it might sound something silly and obvious, but when you have families that don't sit down for dinner or lunch together, you're getting zero debate. I think it's important it's not so much for the food, but sitting down and sharing a meal together, which, you get so many families who just eat out of the fridge directly, and it just seems, and when they do sit down to dinner, they've got their mobile phone or their tablet on, and then they're each having a conversation with somebody else who's not there.
Yeah, and nobody's there. Yeah, nobody's home virtually. Yeah,
nobody's home. Nobody's home here either. I think that there's only one thing that I would say, and every other variable can of course be different. But I think that there's one thing that I would say that is true to every single leader that I've met, good or bad, is that they believe it. Especially a good leader, is that it's natural. You don't feel ashamed. You don't feel guilty. You don't feel you have to explain. No, I'm sorry, but I'm the manager here. No. You just go ahead and do it. The moment that you feel sort of embarrassed or that it's something that you have to justify, and especially in young managers, you see this very often, where they feel sort of very self-conscious about their leadership role. And you see the ones who are naturals as that they're not self-conscious. There's no self-consciousness. And when people ask me what does it take, well, I said, not feeling guilty about it, not being self-conscious about it, not feeling that when you say, okay, Vince, I need you to help me do this, they don't have to launch into
why
lengthy explanations, because the other person naturally doesn't even require it. I believe you need me to do this. And
I think for it is so important, and I don't think it's discussed enough how we take care of our leaders. Because we always think about how do leaders take care of their people. It's like, okay, well, how do you foster leaders? How do you take care of leaders and make sure they don't set up themselves to fail? So I think there's a certain level of catering that's required to position leaders and to ask. It's just basically asking somebody, do you know what you're supposed to lead? Oh, I'm a leader. It's like, all right. What struggle are you fighting, right, as a leader? What do you believe in, and where do you think you should be thriving? And then most people kind of fall short of having a clear answer because they think they can lead. And to a certain degree, it's right, it's true, but it's not true. They believe that, if you're a natural leader, a true leader, and you've lived it for 10 or 20 years, you have this validation that I can tackle any challenge. But that's not true. So I think we need to help kind of those tools or what, all those metrics. So to help leaders figure out okay, you're a great, this is the type of environment where you kind of perform as a leader, where you're recognized as a leader. But I think there's not enough kind of, I don't want to say mentoring, but how do we help leaders figure out and avoid that the same way Churchill or anybody else lived it? Like, you're a leader of your time, leader of your context, and when you've actually done your job, we don't need you anymore. So you need to figure out, either you change your leadership style, and you that's a profound change, right? To look for different types of struggles, or you look for similar struggles in similar contexts that other people are having in other areas. But it's a whole strategy on how do you develop yourself as a person, and if you want to be an all-time leader, like a all-time player, then you seriously need to consider working on your versatility, on what drives you as a leader. If you're driven by success of your people, cool. But if you're driven by specific types of struggles, like say if you're a leader and you're great at startups, you're the guy who can take a company from a basement to a corner office on somewhere in a big city. It's like, cool. Well, you're going to spend your whole life doing that. Are you comfortable? Yes. Perfect. You're off the right track. But I just feel that the whole industry and all those books about leadership, this, leadership, that, doesn't discuss too much about, what type of leader you are, what type of context that you're attracted to, and what type of strategy do you want to have as you're evolving as a person, as you're getting older, as you're probably going to have a family and different needs, and you're becoming this other person. So how do you become a lifetime leader? It's a whole different challenge, and that's my challenge, to figure out, like, how do I stay a lifetime leader? But it's I'm kind of doing it my own way. I'm figuring it out my own way, but I haven't found a single TED Talk or a book that's kind of figuring out. It's not a playbook, but the journey of leadership as things are evolving, because everything seems so generic. I don't see that. I don't know anybody helping us out on trying to figure out that journey.
No. And it what probably makes sense is it should be that way, because I tend to think that also that the talk on leadership, and when books first started really being written about leadership, it was probably in the 1940s with Peter Drucker. Okay.
Love the guy.
Isn't he wonderful?
He's a beast.
Now,
I've read like 4 of his books, and it still sticks to me. He's a beast.
Well, he's a humanist.
Yeah.
He's
the first one who wrote about knowledge workers, and is still 100 years ahead of time. Not 100 years, but close to ahead of time of knowing what is a knowledge worker. And people still struggle to understand what is a knowledge worker, where the majority of us are knowledge workers. I'm sorry, I interrupted, but I'm hooked to that.
No, absolutely. I think absolutely visionary, and he was a humanist. He put humanity into leadership, and his books, I think, still resonate. I had the privilege of meeting him when he was very old already. He was in his 90s. He died and then, because he actually spanned the whole of the 20th century.
I know. He is the bedrock of any business worldwide.
Yes. All concepts of organizational behavior, I think, start.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, we're getting at the end of our talk already. So I'm going to let you finish your thought, and then we'll figure out a way to kind of tie finish up this conversation and
I'll just finish it there. And I think that I just think that the thing about Peter Drucker, that he started a trend, all right. And my question is, has it exhausted itself? Because even the word leader, there's certain words in our vocabulary that have become that we've used so often and so much that they've eroded, like the word freedom, like the word democracy, like the word leader. I think it's so eroded that, and perhaps we're really thinking about something that is, well, it's, first of all, it's impossible. There'll never be a sort of a set of attributes of leadership that are going to work across the board. I think it's situational. I think it's contextual. And we're seeing all sorts of what we call leaders. But perhaps it's time to invent another word. That's why I like, for example, the TMS. They don't call them leaders anymore. They call them linkers. You know, people able to link
Connectors,
people or
yeah,
ideas.
yeah.
Yes, link. You know, so they call they don't even call them the leadership skills. They call them the linking skills.
Yeah.
Which
It's the
you know, they're
same
trying
way
to,
that I think the word leader now, it's like, oh, I'm living. What do you mean? Oh, I'm living. I understand you're living, but how? I'm just living. It's like, that's the same way to say, oh, I'm leading. Okay, you're leading. Fine. How are you leading? No, I'm just leading. I'm a leader. It's like, we're all living beings and we're all leading something. I got 2 kids. I'm leading 2 kids. I'm leading myself to work. It's like, what does it mean anymore? So we killed it. I don't say we killed the meeting, but I think we've reached that. It's like a Russian doll, right? We've
yeah.
reached that first outer shell, and then we're going like, yes, but more. We need to know more. What are you trying to say when you say leader? And then I think this is where those terms like linkers, connectors, I don't think it sounds good, but influencers, coaches, mentors. So all those things are popping up because we're figuring the multiplicity of what it means, like how to lead, and there's a gazillion ways to lead. So having said this, Diana, this has been awesome. I really loved our session.
Thanks very much. It's time has gone by as usual, very fast. Okay.
Yeah, and we'll talk